Me on Dr. Teach Me to Parent today. This is a opportunity for you as a parent to get a little guidance, to get a little lessons in parenting, if you will, opportunity to think through some of the issues that you're facing in your home with your children, opportunity for you to even raise some questions, which people have done over the time of our programming, and I've compiled a number of questions today, and I'm going to walk through several questions today that people have been asking about parenting and some of the finer points of parenting. So we'll focus on that a little bit today. But I'm glad you're with us, and opportunity for you just to become that better parent and to enjoy the parenting process and to become part of it in a emotional sense and in a intellectual sense, but in an interpersonal sense. Parenting is interpersonal. Parenting is connecting. Parenting is bonding. Parenting is coming together. It's uniting yourself with your children and your children with you, and as a family and an extended family and an extended community. You got to work at it. Marriage is work. Parenting is work. Housekeeping is work. You know, it's work. It takes effort and takes work, but it also takes knowledge and it takes some understanding. And that's why we're here today, to bring you that sense of understanding of becoming that better parent and making sure you know how to do it. Okay. Now, remember, I wrote the book, Dr. Teach Me to Parent, and that book is available on Amazon, and it's available on my website, which is there on the screen in front of you. So pick up the book. It's a great book for parenting. If you're a new parent, pick it up. It's a good book for as you start the parenting process. It's a book for parents who are in the adolescent years and having struggles and difficulties with their adolescent kids, the junior high years, the elementary years. I took the scope of children and looked at it from the point of view of parenting and how parents can be better at it. And kids will benefit as a result of that. So pick up the book and make it part of your reading. Have it available. And as issues become available and issues arise within your family life, pick up the book, read it, get some ideas, get some suggestions, and then deal with the issues within your home. Now, let me give you a little quote that one parent stated, and I think it's kind of an interesting statement. It's from an older parent, but it speaks to all of us in our parenting process. Here's what the parent said. If my child were small again, I would stop reading the newspaper, playing with my iPhone, tending to my email, and when he wants to talk with me, I would stop doing those things. I would try to refrain from words of impatience at the interruption. Such times can be the best time to show love and kindness. You see, we as parents get involved in our own world, our own iPhone, our own emails, our own newspaper, our own book, our own article that we're reading, our own project we're working on. Whatever it is, we get involved in that. We get absorbed in that. And when your kids are small and they want your attention, they reach out for your attention in some way, they want you to stop doing what you're doing and just give them a little attention, give them a little time, give them a little focus of your time and attention so that they hear you and you hear them and they feel understood. And just refrain from those words of impatience. When we get interrupted, it's an impatient experience. It's a frustrating experience. We become very agitated and irritable at our kids when they interrupt, especially if they interrupt us over and over and over again. But you know, kids just want one thing. They want you to put that paper down. They want you to put that iPhone down. They want you just to stop and look at them, listen, attend, and then they go on their way and you go on your way. That's the parenting process. It happens at those moments when we are not prepared for it, at those moments when we have other things to do. Parenting takes place at the moments when we have other priorities, when we have other pressures, when we have other demands. That's when the real, true parenting takes place. Are you going to stop those issues and attend to your child, or are you going to ignore your child and keep on doing what your priorities are for that particular day and at that particular moment in time? So be careful, okay, parents? Now, let me give you a little message here from questions that have come in. A number of people have raised questions, and I'm going to walk through several of them today and just give you some mini lessons in parenting on several different issues that have been raised in these questions that have come to me. So I've compiled them, and let's take a look at a number of questions, and then I'll just give you kind of the brief answers, and then we'll move along, okay? What about spanking? Parents always ask the question, can I spank? Is it a bad thing to spank? Will I regret spanking? Will I get in trouble? Will my kid get me in trouble? Will he call CPS because I spank? Well, the answer to that question is yes and no. Yes, you can spank. No, you cannot. Yes, you will get in trouble. No, you won't. Yes, it is a teaching opportunity. No, it is not. You see, spanking isn't just good or bad. It isn't just something to do or not do. It's something to really weigh very carefully and think through very carefully as to whether you engage your child in an act of spanking as a discipline measure, as a correcting measure or not. Now, here's just the rule of thumb. If your child is in danger, your child's life is in danger, you spank, okay? You get that child's attention. You get that child's full attention. Make sure that that child gets the message that that kind of behavior is not acceptable and is not proper and must be stopped and never engaged in again. You see, that's spanking. Now, there are very few occasions when that's necessary. That's hardly ever necessary. You can go through your whole life as a parent with one or two or three and never spank. But there may be a time when that is necessary. Life and death is certainly one example of that. When the child is in severe danger, that may be a necessary option for you to undertake. Now, there's been some research studies on this, and the research studies seem to show that spanking does not come out on top when you compare spanking to other measures of discipline, such as timeout, having the child go to a room and sit for a period of time until he gets under control. That may be a better way. That has always been shown to be a better option than spanking. You know, you might work out some negotiation of rewards as a way to change behavior and to develop a new behavior pattern. That may be an appropriate way to go. And there's research studies that show that that's a better option than is spanking. You see, spanking is not necessarily to be ruled out. But there are a lot of other ways to punish. There are a lot of other ways to discipline. There are a lot of other ways to correct. There's a lot of other ways to bring a child to a point of change of behavior. Use those options. Use those options fully. Use those options first. You see, give the child a chance to change behavior by reasoning or by mild punishment or mild correction. And then you may have to go to something in the form of tough love. And that may be your option later on. So spanking, yeah, that may be necessary, but under rare occasions, okay? Now, here's another question that has come to my attention. What about raising kids in a home that's fatherless? What about fatherless homes? You know, mothers, you have a tough time. You have a tough job to handle. 1 kid, 2 kids, 3 kids in a fatherless home. Yesterday, I happened to talk to a mother. Kids 7, 5, and 1. Father just died as a result of the COVID. Now, here's a mother that's left as a widow and as a single mother for 3 very young children. And that's a tough deal for any mother to face. Now, that happened to be forced on her, thrust on her because of the death of the father her death of her husband. But there are times when fathers leave home on purpose. They make that decision to leave home and to depart from the family and abandon the family. Fathers, terrible decision, terrible action on your part to do that. You see, there's a consequence when kids are left in the home without a father. Maybe a good mother, maybe an inadequate mother, maybe a very adequate mother, who knows? But without a father, you're putting your kids at risk. And those kids have a tremendous road to hoe in life and are subject to all kinds of problems because, Dad, you left the home, you abandoned your kids, you moved away, you moved out, and you left your kids behind uncared for as far as you're concerned, without the father influence. Now, what happens to these kids when they actually have an absent father in their home? Well, take a look at the tree there in front of you. That's kind of saying that the root of a good family is the father. But when the father is gone and those roots are removed, what do you think happens to those kids when there's the absence of father? Okay, take a look at what the tree absences tell you, okay? Look over there on the left. 63% of kids that commit suicide come from a home that's fatherless. Now, suicide rate is going up and up and up right now. 63% of those kids that commit suicide come from a home where father abandoned the home and abandoned the kids. Not good. Look upward. 72% of the kids who drop out of high school come from homes that are fatherless. Dad, you may have dropped out of high school. You may have dropped out of school. And by leaving the home and dropping out of the home, you're teaching your kids to drop out, and they drop out of school. 62% of high school dropouts come from homes that are fatherless. Look there in the middle, 71% of teen pregnancy. Look at that. Teenage pregnancy, it's on the rise. It was going down for a while. Now it's on the rise again. 71% of teenagers who become pregnant come from homes that are fatherless. Dad, you're abandoning your kids. You're letting them live their life and experience the raw edge of life, unfortunately. Look up there on the top. 85% having behavioral disorders. Kids that have no father. Father abandoned them. Father moved out of the home. 85% of the kids that have behavioral problems come from homes that are fatherless. Behavioral problems are getting in trouble with the law, getting in trouble at school with teachers, disobeying parent, disobeying youth leaders, disobeying people in authority in their life. These are behavioral problems, being belligerent, being disobedient in many, many different kinds of ways. These are behavioral. 85% of kids that have these kind of problems come from homes that are fatherless. What about human trafficking? These are these kids out in the street that are subject to the influence of prostitution and influence of people who use them for their own purposes and their own financial gain. We call that human trafficking. 68% of the kids out on the street that are human trafficking come from homes where father was absent. Dad, you blew it. You let your kids just go to the street and live their life and get attention. The attention that you should have been giving them and could have been giving them and raising them in a positive kind of way. Look at the youth in prison. 85% of youth in prison come from homes that are fatherless. 85%. That's almost the entire prison. Almost the entire prison have guys in there and gals in there whose homes do not have a father, did not have a father. Father left. Father abandoned them. And then what about the people on the street? The homeless one on the streets. What about that? Look at that. 90% of those people out on the street, absent a father, lived in a home without a father, and then abandoned the home themselves. That's what homelessness is. These are kids that were either kicked out, like a father was kicked out. They left the home, like a father left the home. They just departed from their responsibilities like the father did, and now they're homeless. 90% of all those people out on the street come from a home that's fatherless. You see, Dad, you're a powerful person. You don't know this. You don't realize it. But you're an extremely powerful person in bringing up your children in a way that they are honorable, in the way that they can experience success and achievement and value in their life, and attention and positive gain in their life, education, work, and income, and stability, and a marriage, and a family, and moving on in their life. Dad, when you leave that home, you put your kids at enormous risk, and you're responsible. And you'll pay a price for that at some point in life. You'll be sad about that. You'll feel guilty about that. You'll have inner dispeace, disruption in your life because you left your kids behind. And you left your kids to just let the wind raise them. That even happens when mothers are good mothers and are trying to be good mothers and are working on being a good mother and are sacrificing for their kids and trying to raise their kids the best they can. And mothers, you often do a good job, but you can't do the whole job because you're not the father. You can only do a partial. You can only do some good work in the life of your children, but you can't do the total job because that job is Dad's job, and you can't do Dad's job for him. Now, it's true. Some people step into the life of a kid, an older brother, an uncle, a grandfather, a neighbor, a friend. That's good. It isn't the father, though. The father is unique. And all these people can come into the life of a child and help the child learn and live, but all those people are inadequate because they're not the father. No one can take the place of the father. So if dads, get on home, okay? I have an interesting thought. The government pays people for being black and being poor if you're black. We're doing that up in Oakland now. We don't pay poor white people. We only pay poor black people. What about if you turned that whole thing around and you paid a father for going back home and you gave him a minimum wage per day for being in that home? He's been gone. But if he decides to go back home to rejoin that family and rejoin that kid, and the government paid him a minimum wage per hour or per day he goes back into that home, we might have a very positive result in the life of our kids. We may turn this thing around. You don't pay people for who they are. You pay people for what they do. Okay? That's the concept. So going back home is like going to work. Going back home is like going to a job. Going back home is going back to a responsibility. Pay a father for doing that, and the kids will benefit as a result of that. Okay, let me move on to the third question, and let's take a look at what this really means. What about the absent parent who's been gone and wants to come back home and wants to rejoin the life of his child? What about that situation? Well, you can't make up for lost time. You can only pick up from where you are and when you come back and move forward. Lost time is lost time. Lost opportunity is lost opportunity. Lost events are lost events. Lost shared visions and shared joys and shared activities are gone. When you were gone, those are gone. But all you can do, Dad, when you come back home, and you should, is to pick up where you left off and move from now forward. And try to become the father that you could be, should be, ought to be, might be, and should have been, but you weren't. Take responsibility. Accept the blame. You made that decision to leave. You made that decision to put your kids at risk. You made that decision to put your kids out into the wind. But if you wake up and you want to come back home, accept responsibility. Ask for forgiveness. Make some promises, but don't renege again. Don't leave again. If you're going to come home and then leave again, don't come home. If you're going to come home and not be responsible, don't come home. Make sure that when you come home with a commitment to stay and to raise those kids and to become part of the kid's life and be a responsible dad and help those kids become a responsible person themselves, okay? So, yes, get on home, but be realistic about it. Now, what about another question there about your kids' friends? The choices of your kids' friends. That's often asked. You know, should parents choose the kids' friends, their kids' friends? Should parents know the friends of their kids? Should parents have an influence on the life of the kids that your kids hang around with and play with? Yes, the answer is yes. Parents, you need to know who your kids are hanging out with. You need to know them well. You need to not just meet them once. You need to know them regularly and periodically be in part of their life. You need to be active in your life of your kids and the people that they hang out with. Know your kids' friends. And then you got to make a decision. You got to have that talk with your kids by saying, you know, this kid I appreciate and I think it's good. Continue to have that friendship. Develop that friendship. Have an influence on that friendship. But this kid over here, no. Exclude that kid from your life. Get away from him. Don't let him come into your life. Don't let him come into this home. Don't let him spend any time with you. Get rid of him because he makes you a mean person. He makes you a person that is negative in your thinking, and that's going to lead to negative behavior. So parents, yes, know your kids' friends and help your kids sort out those friends that are viable and positive and helpful and healthy as compared to those kids that are not healthy, and you need to remove them from the life of your kids. And sometimes that's a tough job to do, but parent, that is your job to do. So do it. Yes, know your kids' friends, influence your kids' friends, have an influence on your kids' friends. Teach your child how to have an influence on his kids. Teach your child how to be a leader among his friends. But there also is that point in time when certain friends need to be removed. I've been in that situation. I know about that. I've done that as a parent. So you do that as a parent as well. Now let's take another question. What about the parent who's been alienating his child from the other parent? We call that parent alienation syndrome. Okay, we have a term for that because it's common. It happens where mother keeps the child away from the father, or a father keeps the child away from the mother, and we alienate the child from the father, from the mother. We alienate the father from the child. Some parents change the name of their kids to do that. Some kids go into hiding, or some parents go into hiding. They hide their kids from their parent, from the other parent. Some move to another state. Some just refuse to allow the other parent to have time with their child, even on the telephone. They set up walls and barriers. You know what? That's child abuse. That is child abuse. It's child abuse in a different form. When one parent excludes the child from seeing the other parent and excludes that other parent from the life of that child, that's child abuse. Now, there may be an occasion when that may have value. We may have a parent that's drug addicted. Well, I wouldn't want my kid to be exposed to a parent that's drug addicted. That's true. But you say to that parent, as soon as you get off your drugs and you're clean, and you've been clean for 6 months, we can start having parent-child time together. You see, you can set up a condition there. Or at a time when if the father is just really a mean-spirited person in some way, abusive to a child, sure, the other parent has a responsibility to protect the child. That's true. But then set up terms where a visit can be taken place under supervision. So a child can have opportunity to be exposed to the father, but under supervision where it would go well and it would be a good visit. You see, you don't need to exclude the other parent. There are times when you need to control the visitation. You need to control the exposure. You need to control the way that parents and child interact to protect that child, but to give that child still exposure to the other parent. So parent alienation syndrome is an abusive activity. And mother, if you're doing that, stop it. Dad, if you're doing that, stop it. Start negotiating a way in that safe visits can take place. Positive visits can take place. And children can have exposure to the other parent. You may not like the other parent. That's understandable. You may detest your former spouse. That's understandable. But that does not mean that your child detests that parent or doesn't like that parent. The child may have an entirely different view and feeling and relationship with the absent parent than you may have. Follow your kids' feelings and do what is best for your kids, not what you want to do as a parent that's been hurt or been abused in some kind of way yourself. Just because a parent has abused you as the mother or the father doesn't mean that that parent has abused the child. That doesn't necessarily follow. You as a mother may have been abused, and you may have your own feelings about that. You may not want your kid to be exposed to that man. But he may never have exposed the child to some form of abuse. May not have. So work out the visit. Protect the child. Put in the structures that are necessary, and then let the visits take place and let the child have exposure to the absent parent that you're trying to keep away. Okay, that's parent alienation syndrome. Not a good thing. And we need to stop that kind of behavior. We're doing it. Now, what about balancing your own personal life against your work life, against your social life as a parent? Are you living a balanced life? Are you balancing your time at home with your time at work? Are you balancing your time with your children, with your time with your friends? Do you have a good, healthy balance in bringing about the areas of life that you're responsible for and you're involved in? Are you balancing life? Are you really able to form a positive experience for yourself and for others by balancing home life among all the other responsibilities that you have? Here's an interesting piece of study that was done, a research study. You have two parents, and if they together work 40 hours a week, however they divide that, 20-20 or 40 and 0 or however that is, 40 hours a week on the part of the parents, those kids in that family, in that home, thrive. On the other hand, if those two parents work a total of 60 hours, maybe one works 40 hours, one works 20, but if they work a total of 60 hours, the kids in that home start to struggle. They struggle academically. They start to struggle socially. They start to struggle in their own personal habits and lifestyle and taking care of themselves. They begin the process of struggling. Now, let me give you a third one. If those two parents work a total of 60 hours, one works 80 hours. If one works 40 hours and the other one works 40 hours, that's 80 hours. The kids in that home definitely go downhill. They definitely have trouble. They live a life of trouble. Many of them drop out of school. They certainly do poorly in school. Social relationships are ill-chosen. You see, behavior patterns are developed that are unhealthy for them and unhealthy for their future. Dad and Mom, if you're totally working 80 hours a week, you're giving your kids a life of risk, a high risk. You're putting them at risk. So rethink your responsibilities. Rethink your devoted time to work and your time to home and your time to your kids and your time to your employment. You may need to make some adjustments there. If your kids are having trouble, at all, start there. Ask, how many hours am I working? How many hours am I absent from the home? How many hours are we as parents absent from the home? Maybe that's the answer to your problem with your kids. Maybe one of you need to reduce the number of hours you work and spend some time at home with your kids, especially now when they're home alone and they're in their Zoom classes and they're sitting alone just by themselves all day. This might be the time to be home with them and turn that time to a good time to be with your kids. So yes, balance your life. Sure you work. Sure you have social responsibilities. Sure you have your own personal interests. And sure you have kids at home. Put it into balance. Okay? And here's the last question that I have come up with that people are asking. What do you do about school next year? Here we've been out of school now. Kids have been out of school almost an entire school year. And they've been Zooming and they've been trying to do part-time school. That's what I call it, part-time school. In the regular classroom, throughout the years, research has shown this. In the regular classroom, kids pay attention 75% of the time. That's in a regular classroom. Teacher, student, desk, other students in a classroom. Kids pay attention to the learning process 75% of the time. But unfortunately, that's not the case in Zoom. If your kid pays attention, half the time he's doing well. Kids are not paying attention to the teaching process on Zoom. So basically, your kids are not in school. They're playing school, but they're not in school. They're not in the learning process. They're not in the learning mode. They're not in the learning activity that's taking place. They're not acquiring. So what do you do when school starts up next September? Or if it starts up this summer? Or whenever it starts up again? What do you as a parent do? Let me give you some guidelines, okay? If you have a boy, consider keeping him behind and repeat the year again. Whatever grade he's in, 3rd grade, 5th grade, 4th grade, repeat the year again if you have a boy. If you have a girl, yeah, she can probably move on and make up and have minimal damage from the loss of the year. That's just boys and girls. Now, if you have a kid that's low achieving, have him repeat the year. If you have a child that's high achieving, perhaps the decision is to move along and they'll catch up. High achieving kids are high achieving kids and they'll catch up and they'll achieve. Low achieving kids are low achieving kids and they don't catch up. Give them an opportunity by repeating the school year if you have a low achieving kid. Now, if your child is young, maybe in the early grades, consider repeating the year. They didn't do very well on Zoom, you know that. So go ahead and repeat the year if you have a kid that's pretty young. 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade. Probably the best thing to do is let them repeat the year and then move on. They'll be better in the long run. All these kids will be better in the long run if they repeat the year. So that's certainly one of the kids that you want to repeat the year. You know, an interesting study was done, and parents, you need to consider this. An interesting study was done. Kids in a community, no matter what the community is, if that community has many different options of education, homeschooling, voucher program, going to a charter school, going to a private school of some kind, and so on. The more options that a community has for their kids' education, the better all kids in that community do. Whether they go to the private school or the public school or a charter school or whatever, all kids do better in the communities that have options, because kids in one option influence kids in another option. And kids that are doing well in one situation influence kids to do well in another situation. There's kind of a coming together. There's like what we call a gestalt. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So kids, mothers, dads, if you're struggling and your community has an option of going to a private school, go. If you have a voucher program available to you, use it. If you have a charter school option available to you, investigate it and go to it. Consider it strongly. If you have a good private school, go to it. If you have a good public school, go to it. If you have a weak public school, don't go to it. Take an option. Choose an option. Get out of the weak public schools. Get out of weak schools totally. Any kind of school that's weak. And where kids are not thriving and they're not succeeding and they're not advancing. So consider your options, Dad and Mom, and pick the option that's best for your kid. You might want to just keep them back, but you may want to move them forward in a different kind of a format. And maybe your kid thrives well in a kind of a homeschooling situation. You may want to repeat that and continue that into next year. That's okay. But here's the question. During this Zoom school year, did your child learn to study independently? Did your child have a question? Think of a question and then go to books and go to the websites and go to different sources and study and learn about that topic and that issue? Did your child learn independent study? If so, move him along. If he didn't, consider holding him back. You see, this is one of the differences between America and many countries in Europe. Kids in Europe are taught how to do independent study, to follow their questions and to study them and to make them worthwhile and read about them and write papers on them and learn about those particular topics, whatever the topic is. Let your curiosity lead you. That's European. We do it in a very different format. So in that sense, if you have a good school for your kid, good, go for it. But if you do not have a good option, you go look at other options available, no matter what they might be. And all options are better than a poor public school, an underserving public school, an underachieving public school. You have to remember that, okay? Unfortunately, California, of all the 50 states, we're number 45. Our kids are way down the list in achievement in California. New York is 36. You say? When you're living in states and cities that have schools that are not achieving, not based on achievement, you may want to consider alternatives. Your kids are valuable. This is a learning opportunity, and it's here now. And here's an opportunity for you to make an adjustment in bringing your kids into a higher level of education than they would be otherwise. So make sure that this is an important part of your life and your kids' life, okay? Now we're going to take a break. Now here's my question when we come back from our break. Blame. You know, in homes and in family life, there's a tendency to build our relationships on blame. We blame younger brother. We blame the older brother. We blame the mother. We blame the father. We blame different people for our problems and our mistake. We're going to take a look at that idea about blame. Is that really something that's healthy? Is blame something to be encouraged? Is blame something to be patterned in a life of a family? What does blame really do? How does blame work in the life of a family, in the life of a child? How does it affect the life of a child? We're going to do that when we come back. Go get a cup of coffee, and I'll see you in a few moments.
When you need a dentist who has a passion for superior aesthetics and comfort, you need Dr. Christopher Wong with Cedar North Dental. Call 559-432-4948 or visit cedarnorthdental.com.
Hey!
Try to close the door.
Tanya, come here. At Boys and Girls Clubs, it's not just about trying new things.
Kitchen in my hometown.
It's not about learning the right steps
4,
or making contact.
5, 6, 7, 8.
It's not about exploring the future. It's about helping them build it. It's about taking steps to greatness, about making a connection. It's about proving every kid and teen has what it takes. It's about people in our clubs who bring out the greatness in every kid who enters our doors. It's not just about being on stage. It's about walking across it. Great futures start here, and here, and here.
Sat7 is a Christian media network that uses uncensored satellite television to broadcast across the Middle East and North Africa, and is also available globally online.
The Green Gables Care Home is a 24-hour assisted living facility for the elderly located in Clovis, California, offering spacious private and semi-private rooms which are wheelchair approved, catering to the special person in your life who needs attention and wants to live in a loving home environment. The Green Gables Care Home has assisted living in secured homes for elderly with Alzheimer's, memory loss, and for your loved ones needing assistance with their activities of daily living. Call 559-297-9438 and visit greengablescarehome.com.
All right, welcome back, and hope you had your cup of coffee, and join me now for the little topic of blame. But it's a big impact on the life of a person. Small word, small topic, big impact. Are you a person who blames? Are you a person who is blamed? You know, I see kids in my office, and they'll say, I was blamed for everything. My little brother, my older brother got away with it, but I was blamed for everything, and so on. They'll go on and tell you a story about that. Now, maybe they weren't blamed for everything, but they see it that way. They feel it that way. That's how they perceive it. The idea of just being blamed, that you're the fault. And somehow, if it weren't for you, this would never have happened. So, blame is a really hurtful activity to engage in. And Dad and Mom, if you're a blamer, if you're blaming kids and you're blaming each other and you're not working out problems, but you're just blaming, you're on the wrong course of life. You're destroying relationships. You're not building relationships. So let me walk you through a couple ideas here, okay? And just kind of look at it this way, about blame, okay? Just this about blame. Blame never affirms. Blame never affirms anybody. You know what it does? It assaults people. It assaults the other person. It's an assault. That's an aggressive act, you see? So blame is an aggressive act. It does not affirm, which means to build up, but to tear down, it assaults. Let me give you a second point. Blame never restores. Never restores. It wounds. It creates wounds. You see, when you blame somebody, you wound them. They need restoring. They need rebuilding. They need revitalization in their life. And when you blame, you don't do that. You step over the whole issue of trying to restore somebody to wholeness, to wellness, to health, and you wound them even deeper. That's what blame does. Here's a third thing blame does. It never solves. It never solves the problem. You know what it does? It complicates the problem. It complicates the problem. In other words, when you blame somebody, you would hope that a problem would be resolved in some kind of way. I guess you kind of hope that maybe by blaming a kid that he'll change his behavior and somehow improve or do it right, do it differently. It just makes more complications because now a kid has to defend himself, has to justify what he did, and gets into arguments, and before you know it, that whole discussion is complicated, and nothing comes out of it that's good. So it doesn't affirm, and it doesn't restore, and it doesn't solve, but it also does not unite. It does not unite people. It doesn't unite parents to child to child, sibling to sibling, parent to parent. It doesn't unite. You know what blame does? It separates. It drives a wedge between mother and dad, between child one and child two, between brother and sister, between child and mother, between child and father. When you live a life and your family life and your home life is full of blame, you drive wedges between people and you separate people into separate categories and you destroy the family bond. You destroy the family relationship. It does not unite, it separates. Also, you know what? Blame never smiles. It never smiles. It frowns. It's a frown. It's a sadness. There's no happiness in blame. There's sadness in blame. Blame never forgives. It's not a forgiving act. You know what it is? It's a rejecting act. You reject each other when you blame each other. You don't come together in forgiveness and in reconciliation. Blame does not reconcile. It brings people into a separate turf, and they reject each other. There's an attitude of rejection for each other that comes from blame. And here's another point that's very important to understand. Blame never forgives. Blame never forgets. Never forgets. It always remembers. It never forgets. You see, the idea of an event happening in the home, yeah, we'd like to forget those things. We'd like to move on and not get stuck in those. But when you blame somebody, you're actually making that issue something that they will never, ever forget. Kids can tell me stories that happened years ago about when they were blamed because they've never forgotten it. They hold a grudge. They hold a revenge. They hold a deep feeling of hurt and wound and pain for the blame that they were given. It might even be a false blame, too, by the way, or it might even be a true blame. Maybe they're blamed truly. But just the idea of blaming, they don't forget. They will always remember those blaming activities, those blaming words that you said as a mother, as a father. And then lastly, blame does not build. Never builds. It destroys. Blame destroys relationships. Blame destroys marriages. Blame destroys family life. Blame destroys the relationship between brother and sister and sister and brother to brother and so on. When you use a life of blame or words of blame in your life as a family, you're not building up that family to become a happy, joyous, healthy, functioning family. No, you're destroying that family to become dysfunctional, unhappy, unhealthy. Stop the blaming. Stop blaming and start enjoying health and start enjoying happiness as a family. You can't blame and have good come from it. It doesn't happen. Blame only divides and separates and hurts and creates wounds and separates people from each other and gives a lingering history of anger and resentment. See, blame backfires, hurting us more than the object itself, which was the cause of resentment or the cause of the problem. You see, it backfires. Stop using it. Listen to yourself. Are you using words of blame, mother? Are you using words of blame, Dad? Are you inflicting upon your family blame attitudes and blame words and blame statements and phrases? If you are, stop it. That doesn't help. It hurts. It drives everybody apart and drives people away from you as the father and from you as the mother and from you as parents. You are separating your kids out. Why would somebody want to be near you if you're going to be blaming them? Why would somebody want to seek you out and spend time with you if they're going to be blamed for everything that goes wrong? No, those kids are going to find themselves leaving your home, walking away from your home, walking away from you, spending more time away from your home, spending more time with their friends where they're not blamed. They're going to avoid you. And then you're going to wonder why your kids are not in your home and don't have a bond, don't have a relationship with you, because you use blame. That's why. Now, let me just say this, that it's very important that we as a family look at our vital signs. We look at our vital signs. Now, we do that physically. Periodically, we check our blood pressure, our heart rate, our blood sugar levels, our oxygen levels, our cholesterol levels, our triglyceride levels. We do that. We go to the doctor and we go to various medical situations and have these kind of things checked to make sure that physically we are healthy and we're doing well. And we are well. But what about family life? What about the vital signs of a family life? Let me give you just a couple of them, and then I'll pick this up again in our next program. But just let me tell you a couple of things that you need to look at as to the vital signs of you as a family. Do you as parents feel close to each other? And do you as parents share authority? That's vital sign number one. Start with parents. Are you talking? Are you relating? Are you discussing? Are you close to each other? Are you talking? Are you sharing your authority so that when one speaks, the other backs up the other one? Are you trusting each other to discipline the children? Are you trusting each other to instruct the children? Are you close to each other? Do you feel a closeness as parents? That's vital sign number one. Give yourself a score of 1 to 5. You need to be a 5 on the scale, by the way. 5 is positive and it's good. Are you 5? In your closest as mother and dad in the life of your family life. Here's the second one. Do you as a family discuss your thoughts and your feelings? Do you have time when you sit around the table, you sit around the living room, you sit in chairs, and you talk about some of the things you think about, some of the things that you feel, some of the things you've heard, some of the things you've read, some of the things you've learned in school today, some of the things that you happen to pick up in your Zoom lesson today? Do you talk about those things? Do you have family life talk time? Do you have family life together time? If you do, give yourself a 5. If you don't, you're down there towards the 1. Your family vital signs include the time that you as a family sit together and talk together and share ideas together and feelings together and problems together and make decisions together. A time to talk, a family time, a family talk time. Do you have it? If so, give yourself a 5. Here's the third one. Family members are allowed to be different one from another. There's a recognition that every child, has their own abilities, has their own skills, has their own interests, and those are sacred and those are definite. A child is born with certain abilities and certain skills and a certain purpose. Another child in that same home is built with a different set of skills, a different set of purpose, a different set of abilities. And there's a recognition that everybody's equal, everybody's loved, everybody's cared for, everybody's welcome, everybody belongs, even though they have different interests, even though they have different ideas, even though they have different thoughts and feelings. That's a family that has high functioning value. Give yourself a 5 if you allow your children to have these kind of differences. Of course, as a family, you have core values. There are things in a family that you believe in as a family. And you want everybody to be on the same page. But then there's that page where kids are different and they have their own life and they go in their own little different directions because they have a different purpose in life and they need to fulfill that purpose in life. Let me give you another one. Parents need to set high standards for their kids. Those standards need to be stated. They need to be very clear. They need to be very articulated. And children need to understand what the standards are and obey them and follow them. And parents, you need to enforce them. If you do that, you're a 5 on the 5-point scale. That's a vital sign. Set high standards for your kids. Make sure that they're very clearly understood. All right? Now, here's another one. Spend time together as a family. Just spend time together. You're having fun. Be part of a community. Be part of the life of a family that's in a community, that's in a whole world of enjoyment and pleasure and fun. Make sure that you do that as a family. If so, give yourself a 5. If you're not, you're at the low end. Time together, family time together is important. Then lastly, family members must solve problems together. You don't solve problems alone. You don't send your kid off to his room and say, you go and solve that problem. Dad, you don't say to your wife, I'm going to work, you stay at home and you solve that problem. You don't do that. Together. You sit down together and you solve problems together. If so, give yourself a 5. Otherwise, you're on the low end of that stick. Okay? That's the vital signs of a family. We'll talk a little bit more about this the next time, but let me just end today with a little story. Okay? And one evening, a small boy tried to show his father a scratch on his finger. Finally, after repeated attempts to gain his father's attention, the father stopped reading and said impatiently, well, I can't do anything about it. Can I? And the little boy responded by saying this, yes, Daddy. The small boy then followed up with this, said, you could say, oh. Interesting, isn't it? It doesn't take much. 2 letters, a small word. Dad, take time. Get away from yourself and get into the life of your family and into the life of your kids. That's where life takes place. That's where happiness takes place. That's where your happiness takes place. If you're not at home, get home. If you're not involved with your kids, get involved. If you're ignoring something, pay attention. Change your life. This is a time of change, a time that's needed more than ever. It's up to you. Bye for now. See you next week.